Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan, and in for Amy this morning is the equally lovely and talented and leggy John Cass, Chicago Tribune columnist. John.
Yeah, leggy. That's what people call it.
Well, that's how you're known in the industry. And we've talked on this show a lot about K-12 funding in Illinois, trying to help distill it because the way it's funded is somewhat complicated and somewhat counterintuitive and turns out to be awfully expensive if you own property in this state. And now that we've had the 15 surrender Republicans in the House vote for Madigan's tax increases, underlying borrowing, no spending reforms, we're moving on to K-12 funding and seeing Chicago Democrats in charge of the General Assembly play the similar game with school funding that they played with the state budget writ large. And so is it possible to simply synthesize this? We talked to State Representative Mark Batnick from Plainfield yesterday and provided a little bit of context to it. But it seems to me that this fight is relatively straightforward, at least at the top line, which is you have Chicago Democrats in charge of the General Assembly, once again attempting to raid suburban school districts to repurpose your property tax repurpose, your general state aid from suburban school districts to bail out Chicago, continue the blank check for Chicago, and to try and buy off some downstate support with some of the money as well. That seems to me essentially what Chicago Democrats are doing because that's what Madigan has done for 4 decades, so why would he stop now? But for more on this, we should probably talk to the man who actually has the veto pen. He is Governor Bruce Rauner, and Governor Rauner joins us now. Governor, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dan, John, good morning. How you guys doing?
Hey, Governor.
Good morning. So you heard my distillation of the issue in 1 or 2 sentences. Is that a fair representation, or how do you view it?
Well, I think you summarized it very well. You know, Speaker Madigan is very experienced in the tactics of extortion, legislative extortion, pressuring members of the General Assembly, creating crises, and forcing bad policy, forcing tax increases, forcing deficit spending, forcing damage to the state of Illinois, forcing bad regulations on businesses, et cetera. And he does that through leveraging crises and extortion. He did that in the budget. We all saw it here at the end of June, and what they did to the taxpayers of Illinois over the 4th of July weekend was outrageous. Madigan basically used our universities and community colleges as hostages for the last 2 years. He wouldn't pass a budget. They were held up. They were suffering. He hurt our human service agencies that provide services to our most vulnerable that are important. He damaged our government operations, all to create pressure, all to create a crisis, to force a massive permanent tax hike with no reforms, no fixing our problems. And in the end, the budget is still not balanced. They still didn't cut wasteful spending. They still are not paying down debt. Nothing's better, but Madigan got the tax hike he wanted, and he forced legislators to go along. He's trying to do exactly the same thing now. The General Assembly passed a school funding bill 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, they passed a school funding bill. They have not sent that bill to my desk. Why haven't they sent it to my desk? Madigan wants to wait until August. So the schools are screaming. They're desperate for their money. They want to get open. Children need to go to school and get educated, and Madigan will hold it till the very end, and then he'll say, this is the only school funding available. Governor, sign it, and legislators go along with him or override him if he vetoes it. But otherwise, your schools won't open, and I will hold them hostage until this plan gets done. And he inserted a poison pill that's terrible for taxpayers in the school funding plan. He inserted a bailout for Chicago's pensions, which have been mismanaged for decades. They have not properly funded for decades. They have been improperly structured for decades. And he wants to force taxpayers around the state of Illinois to take the money that should go to their schools, that should go to the teachers in the suburbs and the children in the suburbs and downstate, and force that money rather than going in the classroom to go to Chicago pensions.
So
that's what's happening.
That's the big difference, is the $215 million that you're referring to, that they want to funnel to Chicago to make a pension payment to, again, try and push off the inevitable for 1 or 2 days longer. You want to put in through the school funding formula to distribute to schools around the state. Is that the crux of it?
That's exactly right. The money should go to the teachers in the classroom. Their money should not be diverted into pension payments for Chicago. And, Dan, let me give you a few numbers so you can understand the magnitude of what we're dealing with here. So for Aurora East in the far west suburbs, this diversion by Madigan is going to take $4 million per year away from Aurora East and funnel it to Chicago pensions. $4 million for Aurora. His diversion of money from schools is going to take $3 million per year away from Joliet School District and funnel it to Chicago pensions. He's going to take almost $500,000 away from Harvey on the south suburbs. Struggling community, a lot of low-income families that deserve great educational opportunities for their kids. $500,000 a year is going to be taken away from them in Harvey and siphoned off, sent up to Chicago pensions. Waukegan, a lot of struggling families that deserve our support. They need a great education for their children. Waukegan, more than $4 million per year taken away from them and siphoned to Chicago pensions by Speaker Madigan's proposal. Rita Mayfield up there should stand against this. And that the story is true again and again around the state. Millions of dollars in local school districts, money that should go to them, is going to be taken away from them and sent to Chicago. And that's why I've been clear. I will amendatory veto Madigan's bill, take out the pension payment shenanigans. That should be dealt with separately. Pension reform should be its own issue, and we should fix the pensions and help Chicago fix their pensions, and I will do that. But the Chicago pension issue should not be tried to fix by taking money away from schools around the state. That is not fair, and we can't let that happen.
If this comes to a crisis point, as you say Madigan will do, I ask you, what are you going to do about those 15 Republicans who sided with him to raise the income tax without
John,
reform? What are you going to do as the de facto chairman of the Republican Party as well as the governor in their own primaries?
Well, here, John, what we've got 3 weeks or so until schools have got to open, have got to get their money. We've got 3 weeks to focus, and we've got to let all of your listeners know and let all the people of Illinois know our schools must open on time with fair funding for our teachers and our kids. We've got to put our kids first. Our children should be our top priority. Nothing more important than our children.
What about
our schools should open on time. And, John, what we've got to do is make sure everybody knows whether they are a Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. They need to reach out to their legislator and say, don't support Madigan's Senate Bill 1, SB 1. That's Madigan's manipulation. Don't support it. Have Madigan send it to the governor's desk right now so that the governor can veto, a mandatory veto that bill, change it, and support the governor's amendatory.
I got it, Governor, but I ask you again with respect. What are you going to do about the 15 Republicans who sided with Madigan and basically, and then the 10 that played a game and overrode your veto to increase taxes by 32%? Because while you're talking about this as a school issue, as a suburban taxpayer, I also look at it as a taxpayer issue because the suburban taxpayers are going to end up paying. So what are you going to do?
Right.
What are you going to do about those legislators who basically cut and run and made a deal with, got made by Mike?
You're right. It's absolutely a tax issue, and the massive, unfair, outrageous tax hike Madigan forced is directly tied to this unfair, ridiculous pension bailout. They're all tied. But, John, you know what? We have to focus right now on one thing, getting the schools open on time with fair funding. And the way to do that is for all of us to get the message to the people of Illinois. Contact your legislator, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican, and tell them, Get that education funding bill right now to the governor's desk today. Don't wait until August. Don't wait to force a crisis. And the governor's going to mandatory veto it, fix it, and then the schools will get the money they deserve. And the pressure's got to come now. We can't wait. We can't talk about other topics. We've got to focus like a laser, get the bill to my desk. I will fix it. And then they need to support my fix, and then it'll be fair for everybody.
Well, that last part, support your fix. Are you concerned if Madigan moves to override again, as he did with the budget, that you will have enough of those same Republicans who revolted to Madigan's camp do so again?
Well, I'm always concerned. You know, Madigan has been in power for 35 years, and he has used his extortion and his threats and his intimidation and his various ways of buying votes in the General Assembly through various, techniques he uses to get bad votes taken. That's why all of us need to call on every legislator, everyone, Democrats and Republicans both, do not support SB 1. Get that bill. That bill has already passed, but it didn't pass with a veto-proof majority. It did not pass on a veto-proof majority. But get that bill to my desk today. Don't wait. Don't let the crisis be built by Madigan to give him leverage. Get that bill to my desk today. I will fix that bill, and then stand with me. Do not override my veto, and then everybody in the state will be better off, including Chicago, because Chicago gets more money in the classroom under our fix, and we can also separately, at the appropriate time, help deal with pensions that will help Chicago, but also help pensions all around the state. Pensions are their own subject. They should not be the issue that blocks fair school funding and gets the schools open on time. Those are separate issues.
The last thing I'm going to do is argue for Rahm Emanuel, your old buddy, who's now probably in Italy getting shoes for himself or a suit. But don't they have a point?
Geppetto.
What, Geppetto?
Yeah.
Right.
Someday he'll grow up to be a real boy too.
But in the meantime, you have their argument is the state pays for the pensions for the other school districts. Why shouldn't they be paying more for Chicago?
Fixing the pension system is a good thing to do. I've advocated for pension reform for years. Speaker Madigan has refused to do it. And what we do not do is tie a classroom funding to fixing the pensions. Fixing the pensions is its own separate subject, and we can deal with it in Chicago and around the state. We've got to do that, and I've been pushing that for years, but we can't. What they're proposing is a bailout. Bailout is not fixing the pension system. A bailout is taking money that should go into the classroom in Harvey and Aurora and Decatur and Waukegan and Cicero and Harvey, taking money out of the classroom to bail out a pension. That's not fixing the pension problem. That's putting more pressure on our taxpayers, and it's unfair to our teachers and kids in the classroom. The two should need to be separated, dealt with in the appropriate way. Let's get schools open on time with fair funding. Get that bill to my desk. I will mandatory veto it. I'll fix it, and then we'll deal with pensions separately for Chicago and the rest of the state, and fix those as well, that in a way that's good for taxpayers.
There's an additional component on the K through 12, and since you're focused on particularly families that are, middle income, we're talking about communities that are disproportionately minority, many low income families as well, kids on free and reduced school lunch and the like that need the resources. There's another piece of this too, and that's a tax credit that's been proposed, and that's actually received bipartisan support that would allow for voluntary contributions to scholarship funds that would provide scholarships to a lot of those families and those kids in the communities you're mentioning. Is that something that is going to be a must-have in terms of what you want out of this school funding proposal?
Well, that's certainly a concept that I support, and I've supported for years. But again, Dan, we've got to focus. There's a lot of subjects, a lot of things we can improve, a lot of pension reform needs to happen. Those are all important topics. We'll deal with them at the appropriate time. What we've got to do is focus like a laser. We got 3 weeks. Do not let Madigan create a crisis for a bailout that fixes nothing. It just creates more tax problems for the people of Illinois, higher taxes for the people, and doesn't fund our schools fairly. Get the money in the classroom with the teachers and the students. They should be the priority. I will fix that bill, but he's got to get it to my desk. We can't let him create a crisis to force the bad outcome like he did on our budget.
All right. He is Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner. Governor Rauner, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. John, take care.